you've got to find something about that career that you absolutely love, something that gets you out of bed every single day. I mean, not once have I woken up in the morning and dreaded going to work since I made this change. I consider myself very lucky. I know I'm not the norm. It's a privilege to be in this industry. I'm not going to lie. I feel myself very lucky. I consider myself very lucky.
This is The Crackling. I'm Anthony Huckstep. After feeling out of his depth as a leader in a kitchen while working as a chef, Darren O'Rourke decided to reassess his career in the food industry. The moment led him to a move into butchery, and a decade later, he's become The moment led him to move into butchery, and a decade later, he's become one of Australia's very best. Darren, he made the transition from chef to butcher. What sparked that career change?
It was, I mean, it all stems from my work ethic and the way I look at sort of people that I admire and people that lead me. And I can never work for people that I don't absolutely respect, admire, and sort of can learn from. And I mean, that's just the way I've kind of always been with anyone that I look up to or with anyone that's leading me. I guess what it came down to was that, to make a very long story short, I started my apprenticeship when I was about sort of 26 or 27 and progressed really quickly in the one place at the Bathers Pavilion in Balmoral. Super busy kitchen, really full on. Service didn't stop from 7 a.m. till sort of 10 at night. But essentially what happened was when I did get out and move to a different kitchen, I went to work for Alex Herbert at Birdcar Fish. And there was one particular night there we'd run out of a certain dessert, and I just kind of froze. Because of where I'd done my training, I didn't spend a lot of time in the pastry kitchen. And this particular night, middle of service, we'd run out of a dessert and I couldn't come up with an alternative just to sort of keep the ball rolling. One of our apprentices did. And it was that little moment that kind of just made me think that I had by default become one of those people that if the tables were turned, I couldn't look up to them or look to them for advice or the next move sort of thing. So, I mean, it wasn't a poor me kind of a situation. It was just hang on, you need to reassess this and work out what to do sort of thing, whether it was by this stage I'm 32 or something. So yeah, I didn't have that luxury, I guess, for want of a better word, of moving around during my apprenticeship. I just stayed in the one spot for 7 years, and yeah, that moment just kind of made me think, hang on, I need to reassess this. And that's when Victor Churchill, the rumour mill was sort of kicking over, and I found myself applying for a job there. And that's kind of, that was 12 years ago.
How did that feel, that process of transitioning to a butcher? Were you nervous about it? And when you first started the job, what did it feel like?
Well, it was a slow transition, because when I moved over there, I just became one of the floor staff. So, the floor at Victor Churchill, there's the service staff, and then there's the sort of the slicing and the rotisserie counter. So I found myself on that slicing rotisserie counter for the first few months. And it was and when you're on that counter, whoever was on that one, that section was so busy that you just didn't get off it. You were there from the very beginning, way before the shop opened up, getting the chickens and everything ready. And you were just there until the end. So you didn't even have that much time or need, for that matter, to get to the front of the store and even look at what was happening in the fresh meat counter or what the butchers were doing. So it was only when I kind of organically made my way off that section closer to the front of the store that I just found myself hanging around the butcher's door, just talking to them and getting ready to sort of help them whenever they needed something. So it was a really, really slow transition. It started out as, running to get this and that, maybe cutting a couple of spatchcocks, whatever. And then it progressed into a day here, 2 days, and so it was super slow.
You mentioned earlier that you started your apprenticeship around 26, 27, which is a lot later than most people. Tell us about the years before that. Why did you make that move into food?
I worked straight from sort of year 12. I was never going to go to uni. but it didn't really dawn on me that I didn't have much to do until school had finished, and I found my way into a college at Parramatta doing sort of hospitality and that sort of thing. And I just, the bar work component of that course really kind of resonated with me for obvious reasons, being an 18, 19-year-old working with alcohol. But it sort of went, I got a job at the local bar we did our training with and our sort of courses there. And then that led to a job at the Novotel in Darling Harbour, and I ended up staying there for 5 years or so and moved to London. So after, sort of 3.5 years in London, I got back and I'd promised myself that I'd be doing something completely different within a year. And again, I got back from London and found myself working behind a bar again at the Bathers Pavilion. And it was, it was Serge that made it all happen. He sort of, I went to Serge one afternoon for some advice on cooking. I wanted to learn how to cook because when I was in the UK, I sort of, I started to find this love of good food and amazing produce and all of that sort of thing, because I didn't grow up this way, I'm meat and 3 veg kind of kid. But I wanted to learn how to cook and I wanted a bit of discipline. And Serge, I said to Serge, look, should I go to TAFE and just do the cooking course there, or what should I do? And he said, just, start an apprenticeship. But of course, at that age, I didn't think it was possible. And I made that very clear to Serge, just from a money point of view. But I mean, he was amazing. And he just said, look, you move into the kitchen now, you stay on the same salary you are as head barman, and you do TAFE on your day off. And so, if it wasn't for Serge, none of this, I think it's safe to say, none of this would have happened. This path never would have opened up for me.
Tell us about your time in that kitchen and working with Serge. He's one of Australia's most influential chefs, and Bathers Pavilion is legendary. What was it like in that kitchen?
It was, look, there's 3 kitchens in that place. There's obviously the fine dining restaurant and the cafe, and then the pastry kitchen. So I was moved into the cafe there. I worked under a chef named Philip Sajwitz. Serge was obviously in there a lot, but he devoted the bulk of his time in the fine dining restaurant. So, in the early days, it was me just learning directly from, my sous chefs and from Philip. But it was a hardcore kitchen. We opened at 7 for breakfast, and then it flowed at midday, it flowed straight into lunch. And then from lunch, it didn't stop until dinner service was over. Back then, if we did any less than sort of 600 or so on a Sunday, it was considered a quiet day. It's a machine of a kitchen, an absolute machine of a kitchen. An amazing thing. I ended up getting to sous chef level, and that was always my goal. I was never going to cook forever. I gave myself 10 years or until I got to sous chef, and I did get to sous chef at Bathers. And the amount of times on a Sunday I used to just walk off the line and just stand there and just watch. It's like any kitchen, and so many chefs can attest to, just watching the way a line works it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It was really an amazing place. I learned a hell of a lot from there, that's for sure.
You mentioned Bird Cow Fish, and Alex Herbert's one of our finest chefs as well, and restaurateurs. What was it like in that kitchen compared to the Bathers? It
was so different. Bathers was we had 2 crews in the brigade. There was probably 12 or 13 in the brigade in total. Bird Cow Fish was just a small handful of us, and Alex was there on the pans every single night as well. What you got to learn under. Look, Alex was the first person that really introduced to me that whole concept of a restaurateur or a chef or a food business having direct, open, and very, very real conversations directly with the producers. She'd worked with Maggie and Colin Beer, for that many years, and relationships she had directly with Richard Gunner. With so many people. The bulk of what we bought at the time was directly from the farmer. She was buying stuff directly from Grant Hilliard way back in the day when it was just sort of eggs here and this sort of stuff. Like it was a real change of attitude for me, and to be honest, at the time I took it all for granted in a really big way. But looking back on it, Alex is very much a huge reason why I sort of have the mentality I have now. And yeah, she's if Serge certainly started this journey for me, but Alex turned it in a way that at the time I don't think anyone else ever could have, to be honest.
Tell us about, you talked about the early transition and the organic nature of moving to become a butcher while you were at Victor Churchill. When you started in that sort of butcher section, once you'd been there a little while, what was it like? How can you compare it to being in a kitchen? Is it quite different, or are there similarities?
I think the thing that really it was funny. I had this habit just of looking at the time, just before midday, because you're obviously getting ready for lunch service in the kitchen or whatever. And I just was naturally I'd look at the clock at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever, and I'd be all sort of wound up, ready to go into service, and then thinking, hang on, I'm not in that game anymore. It's a little bit different. But I mean, look, it was certainly, it almost felt like it was a prep day. You spent the entire day doing prep, but you were serving at the same time. And it was a bit different for the butchers at Victor Churchill back then, because by and large, we didn't do any of the sort of the face-to-face serving of the customers. It's changed a lot now, and we certainly do. But back then it was literally just you prepped, you filled the case, you prepped some more, and you kept filling the case. It was, very different. Tell
us a bit about Victor Churchill. We'll get to Vic's Meats soon because your role is with that now, but it's won awards all over the globe. It's the most extraordinary butcher. For those that haven't been there, tell us about what it offers.
What it offers. I mean, look, it started out offering something that certainly, to my mind, no retail butcher store in the country offered. That being product that was otherwise destined for export markets or destined for some of the finest plates in the finest restaurants in the country. I mean, we all know just how good our primary producers are and how good our sort of, beef and lamb and everything else is. But I mean, the fact is the vast majority of it is destined for export. And as I say, the rest of it is mostly going to the food service industry. So there were no butcher shops that were offering meat of that quality. So from the outset, that was what set Victor Churchill apart in my opinion, my belief. Forgetting the aesthetics and everything else about Victor Churchill, but it was all based on product. It was based on getting the best of the best and giving that best of the best to a different market and to people that might not otherwise have been able to afford it, or maybe not afford it, but not have had access to it. It was a very, very different store. I mean, the first day I walked in there for the interview, as a lot of people have done since, I kind of walked in there and just looked around and had a good hard look at myself and thought, hang on, can I even work in a place like this? It was quite daunting. But the funny thing is, and ironically, it's the most undaunting place I've ever worked in. And that was all built around the culture that we fought really, really hard to build there, about being welcoming, about it being the experience. It's a really, really special place, hey?
You've been working with the Paharich family for over a decade now. What's it like? They're quite hands-on with the businesses. What's it like working with them?
Never a dull moment. It's. I mean, you can't get a better sort of way of describing the way the family works. I mean, Anthony's there 7 days a week. Anita's there sort of 6 days a week and still working remotely on the seventh day virtually. Vic to this day is still there 6 days a week. I mean, the amount of hours I spent next to that man during COVID, you can't help but find yourself. I mean, look, I was already loyal to the family anyway, just because, they were the ones that gave me the chance to do what I wanted to do, amongst other things. But you can't help but want to work for people that work harder than you ever can do, not just because it's their business, but because they believe in what they're doing. Vic leads from the front. That what that guy at his age can do, would blow most people half his age out of the water. I mean, the guy is he's a machine.
With your background with chefing, has there been skills and lessons learnt that you've transferred into your butchery career?
Yeah, totally. I think the one thing that I found when I started butchery was that, and I still think this now, it's certainly changing, but it was just same. It didn't matter what store you went to, in what corner of what country town in any part of the country. It was by and large same cuts, same colours, same specs. Like, it was just same. Everything was the same. And I was really lucky enough to be working with, back in the day there, Vic and Danny and Pete. So, guys that collectively over 150 years worth of experience sort of thing. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know about, I had that chef's fascination, that chef's, sort of drive and want to change the menu and keep it evolving sort of thing. So I wanted to know all sorts of different things. And, the guys that were teaching me, they didn't know these answers, but they never lied to me. They never sort of led me down the wrong path or tried to convince me that something that was wrong was actually right, just because, that's how they wanted to roll. They didn't do that. They just said they didn't know, and they gave me everything they could give me to try and work it out for myself. So I guess from the outset, I was always looking at that case, that display at Victor Churchill. I tried to never look at it as just being a butcher's display, and it was the same thing every single day. I wanted to change it as much as I could. I wanted it to evolve. I wanted it to be more seasonal. So I guess in that regard, coming from sort of 10 years in the kitchen, I wanted to translate that through into the butcher's case, which I didn't feel like many butchers did at the time, to be honest.
You've now moved to work on the Vic's meat side of things, which is far greater volume, but there's that continual sort of connection with farmers and ethical meats. Give us a sense of the scale of your role and Vic's meat.
Yeah, it's been a bit of an evolving role since I moved there. So I moved there just over 2 years ago. In the beginning, it was meant to be sort of a kind of a pivotal role. I was meant to sort of fill this gap, try and be a bit of a conduit between producers, our sales team, our production team, and our purchasing team. But as that role started to sort of progress and I started to find my feet and felt like I was starting to add value, that's when sort of COVID hit and obviously everything changed. So, that was where Anthony just said to me, look, everything that we'd planned to do needs to go on hold, and I just need people to be where they're going to help the most, where they're going to bring the most value. And for me, that was straight back downstairs on the knives. So
wow,
I was down there for what, the better part of a year and a half. As I say, working next to Vic every day. And, we kind of rebuilt that team. We had a large team of butchers and we lost quite a few of them through the process for various reasons. And it ended up at the start of COVID, it was literally just me and Vic. And then, a few more sort of came back on, and we've built it now to a really solid team. The guy that runs the show down there now, Troy's an old school butcher with an engine, bigger than a jet plane. The guy's he's a machine as well. So it was a slow build to get it back up to where we are now, going through the inception of the online business and then sort of rebuilding food service. And, that's a massive focus for us now is to rebuild that side of it. But now I've moved back up into the office now into another change again. So I'm more in purchasing, a little bit of sales, but back again with that producer relations and sort of, trying to fill that void there between a few different departments. So it's another massive challenge for me.
You mentioned that your time with Alex Herbert triggered that sort of connection with producers, and it's something that Vic's Meats is renowned for, highlighting the talents of some of the best producers in Australia. Tell us about some of the pork producers that you deal with and what makes their products so great.
Look, if we're talking about sort of on a larger scale, the Kurabuta pork, the Berkshire pigs that we use at Vic's are Vix has been using those, for the better part of sort of 14, 15 years, I think it is. I mean, I distinctly remember ordering that pork from Vix when I was at Bird Cow Fish. So that's a product that I've been working with for the whole time I've been with Vix. Incredible product. It's always super consistent. I mean, to be honest, and not just plugging the product I work with, but it is actually the pork that changed my mind on pork. Wasn't a fan of pork prior to working at Bird Cow Fish. It was only through trying this product I thought, hang on, I've clearly not been eating good pork up until this point, which is not. I'm not the only person to have said that. I mean, we're lucky now that there are so many good pork producers around. I mean, I've worked with, sort of Chris Kelly from Crackwillow Farm. He's not there anymore, but he was doing amazing pigs. Andrew Hearn at Near River Produce up at Pappenborough on the mid-north coast, up near Warhope there. Sam and Katrina Spark at Redleaf Farm in Fitzroy Falls. I mean, I've been lucky enough to work with some phenomenal pork over the years. Bandara Berkshires are really great. Millbrook from Victoria, Berkshires are fantastic. There's some really good pork out there, hey, really good.
There's a real art to butchering whole animals. Is it something? Tell us a bit about butchering whole pigs and some of your favourite cuts that perhaps aren't ones that are sort of common to most people.
Yeah, sure. I mean, pigs are breaking down a whole pig it's kind of done in pretty much the same way every time. It's not to say that there aren't possibilities to use them differently. Of course there are. But I think, the thing that sort of resonated with me mostly was when I was in the UK living over there. I had a Spanish girlfriend for quite a while, and we spent a lot of time in Spain. We'd sort of fly back and forth from London to Madrid, once every 2-3 weeks, whatever. The flights were just so damn cheap. But, some of the way the Spanish break down their pigs, the way they breed their pigs, the way they process them and break them down is completely different to us, as I'm sure you and a lot of people would know. But even just those famous Spanish cuts, the Presa and Pluma and Secreto, it took me a long time to work out where all of those cuts came from. But that's something that we do at the moment for our online store. We break them down a little bit differently to offer those sorts of cuts, so it's not just racks and cutlets and loin chops the whole way through. I mean that everyone knows that the pig is literally the most giving animal on the land in terms of what you can get from it, and it's so true. It's so true. I mean, even the belly, you can break that entire belly down into each individual muscle, and each one can be used in a different way with a cooking application. There's always more to learn from breaking down pigs, I reckon.
You have the background of being a chef and now one of Australia's best butchers. But are you on the pans much these days at home? Do you cook many pork dishes? Is there any cuts you like to cook you can tell us about?
Yeah, I do at home a hell of a lot. I mean, at least every second Sunday for me is spent sort of cooking something. Look, I'm always using my smoker or, doing something not so much slow. I'm not into fancy food. I'm not into sort of, I don't know. I like cooking simply. I've only ever liked cooking simply and not to bring anything new to the table. Everyone knows full well that if you start with amazing ingredients, there's nowhere to hide. It's not the cook or the chef's ego or anything like that on the plate. It's just the food. You're more putting, if anything, you're putting the producer on the plate. You're putting what they have done, because at the end of the day, that's where it all starts. You can't polish a turd, so to speak. So if you start with rubbish, it doesn't matter what you do to it, it's going to end up as rubbish. So I guess my love of cooking simply is driven by that, driven by a respect for what the producers have done in the very beginning to sort of get it to us. I mean, in terms of cooking with pork here, I don't know. I love the fattier cuts. I love sort of confying belly or there was once I had a a suckling shoulder from Katrina and Sam at Redleaf. And this thing, I ended up, I confit it overnight, you salted it as you should sort of thing, and confit it overnight. And then that one was sort of simply roasted the next day, like really blasted, really, really hot. And I've never, ever, ever been able to replicate how that one turned out. That was probably the one of the best things, certainly the best pork product I've ever cooked. But even, sort of breaking the jowl down, getting that really thin sort of piece of ribbon of meat out of the center of the jowl and using that as a fast cooking cut as opposed to a braising cut. Incredible. I mean, trotters, I remember when we used to get we used to get some pigs out of Millbrook in Victoria, and the way they were processed there, they always left, quite often you'll see the front trotters are either broken off or they're split from the hock itself, but all of those ones were always left intact. And I used to love boning those out and then filling them. I mean, Nick Hill at the Old Fitz at the time, now Porcine, he was taking those off me, and he was doing this phenomenal, I'm sure you would have seen it. It was a stuffed trotter with the head bacon he used to make, and then it was deep fried and served with grabiche or something. I mean, yeah, that's food of the angels as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. I'll cook anything. I get bored very easily. I'll cook anything, and I'll never rest on that's the best way to cook that product or that cut. So that's all I'm ever going to do. I always get itchy feet and want to try something different. And you know what? It doesn't always work, but I mean, that's what keeps you learning, right?
The transition that you made from chef to butcher has become pretty amazing, and the company's done amazing things, and you've been a big part of that. But what is it that you love about being a butcher?
It's funny. It's kind of everything. I mean, I love early mornings. I love getting out of bed before the sun rises. I love the smell of the butcher shop. I love the cold. I've always been someone that hates summer and hates being hot. So, yeah, like if I had my way, it would be kind of grey and 13, 14 degrees every day of the year. So, yeah, working stupid hours in the morning in a cold environment ticks 90% of my boxes. But aside from that, it's all started with this, I mean, I guess you can put it all down to a few sort of pivotal points in my life, and one of them being the time that I spent in Spain being exposed to, eating wood-grilled sardines on a plastic tablecloth sort of table in a tiny little place up in the north of Spain in Asturias. There's tiny little moments that just ignited this love of food, which in turn ignited a want to cook, which in turn ignited hang on, I need to step sideways and move to a butchery. So there's nothing about food that I don't love. I just seem to have found a bit of a home in butchery and a love for producers and what they do. I don't know. There's not a single part of this industry that I don't love.
The last year has been challenging, and you sort of briefly touched on some of the changes in your career as a result of that. How have you felt in the last year? Are you treating your job and role differently with the connection with farmers and consumers?
Definitely with consumers, because at the end of the day, consumers are what have gotten us through the last sort of 18 months. We flash back to when food service and all of those amazing restaurants across the country just fell off a cliff. We had a lot of product that had to go somewhere, and it was consumers that saved us. I mean, there's no denying that. So certainly the first part of that time that I spent back on the knives was all devoted towards the product and where we were going to put it, where we were going to place it, what we were going to do with it, and where we were going to place it. It's now shifted, now that we've found some really amazing homes and some amazing applications and where to put these things, my focus has certainly shifted. It's not just with my role change, but, with a bit of comfort in what we were doing, I had a bit more time and a bit more sort of mental energy to spend trying to focus back on producers and trying to rekindle some some conversations that were started and just sort of ended abruptly. But yeah, I mean, the focus for me is certainly doing another U-turn and going back towards where it all begins on the land sort of thing.
There's been a lot of people considering career changes and over the last year, given what's happened, and you've made a real success of a career change. What advice would you have for people that are looking to do something a bit sort of to the left or right of what they're doing?
Look, I guess if you're going to make a career change, you're doing it because you clearly want to. So I guess the whole thing really for me, really focusing on that fact that, I mean, for me, I had a cut and dry reason. I had to do it because I had become that person that I felt couldn't lead a team. And as I say, that wasn't a poor me moment. It was just a realization. So I had a real desire and a very real need to find something that I could do and to never put myself in that position again. I don't ever want to be in the position that anyone that I work with can't look to me for an answer, and I'm not saying I've got all the answers. I mean, you learn something new every single day. It's something I hold really close to my heart, but I'm in a better position now than I ever have been to either give the answer, find the answer, or point you in the right direction of the answer. So in terms of changing careers, I guess you just have to focus on the end goal. Why did you want to change careers in the first place? You've got to find something about that career that you absolutely love, something that gets you out of bed every single day. I mean, you know, I'm not just saying this, but not once have I woken up in the morning and dreaded going to work since I made this change.
Wow.
It's and that's, you know, that's hand on heart truth. I consider myself very lucky. I know I'm not the norm, but I also know that this industry breeds a lot of really strong, really passionate and amazingly devoted and resilient people right the way through, from the land right the way through to the butcher. Look, Huck, it's a privilege to be in this industry. I'm not going to lie. I feel myself very lucky. I consider myself very lucky.
Well, we've been very lucky to have you share your story on the Crackling today. You're a bloody inspiration, mate, and what you guys do is amazing. And the spotlight that you put on the incredible producers is just amazing as well. We've loved having you on the Crackling today, mate. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
I will, man. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
This is The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with PorkStar. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we catch up with some of Australia's best chefs and pork producers to discover what makes Australian pork so special.